Alrighty guys, I wanted to build on what we looked at yesterday with the supply curves. So first off, let's look over this supply schedule together again to look at how to kind of map these things out. Alright, so first off, just like with our demand curves, alright, when we're mapping out our supply curves, we use our L chart. Price will go on the y-axis, quantity will go on the x-axis. Alright, and so we start low and work our way high. So we start out with, we're looking at shirts. We're doing $5, $10, $15, $20, $25. And if we're looking at quantity, we'll start low and work our way high. So 100 shirts, 150, 200, 250, and 300 shirts. All right, so first off, let me just double check real quick that you can see this chart that I'm doing. Yeah, that looks good. One moment. All right, and so when we're mapping out the supply curve, it should have the opposite relationship, right? That at a lower price, a business isn't going to want to supply as many of that product because they're not making as big of a profit. But as the price of that product rises, they'd be more willing to supply it because they're going to make a bigger profit. All right, so let's go ahead and map this out. At $5, the business would be willing to supply 100 of these shirts. At $10, 150. At $15, 200. At $20, 250. At $25, they'll supply 300 of them. All right, and so unlike our demand curve, which will always go down, let's remember that our supply curve will always go in an upwards direction. That's because as the price goes up, our business will be willing to supply more and more of them. So what we're going to look at today is how the supply curve can shift. So we'll leave this up here, and again, we'll need to label it. So we'll be looking at t-shirts in this case. All right, and we'll look at some of the things that can influence our supply curve. So just like with our demand curve, it can be changed for two reasons. One, a change in price, if we move from $5 to $15. So if it's a change in price, it's just a change in quantity supplied. If it's a change in anything else, then the curve will move. And we'll take a look at some scenarios again in just a moment. All right, and so just like we were saying a second ago, if it's a change in price, we're going to move along the curve. If it's a change in anything else, the curve will move. And let's take a look at what we mean by that. All right, so to go back to our supply schedule a second ago, we've got price, we've got quantity supplied. Crap, let me make sure that you are able to see this too. No, that's cut off a little bit for you. I'll put it underneath it then. I don't know what that sound was. But okay, so yeah, we'll just copy down the supply schedule real quick. All right, let me show you, y'all can see. All right, good. So yeah, we got our supply schedule. And so as far as looking at things that can change our supply of a good. All right, so if our supply is increasing, that means that we're going to be able to make more at the same price. If our supply is decreasing, that means we'll be able to make less. All right, so let's look at a second scenario. All right, so this is QS1. This is our original supply curve. All right, so let's say that right now it costs $3 to make a t-shirt. All right, so at $5, our profit's only going to be $2, right? We're not making a whole lot of money. But if we could sell the shirt for $20, then we're going to be making $17. So we'd much rather sell it at $20 than we would $5. So here we've got to be able to separate the supply and demand from one another. But let's look at what can move this curve now. So let's say that a storm wipes out a lot of the cotton in Georgia. Georgia produces a lot of cotton. Well, whenever we get rid of this cotton, it's going to make our costs more expensive. That cotton is going to be more expensive. And so like, let's say that now it costs $8 to make a t-shirt. Well, that's going to change our supply as well. So let's do a new column. We'll call it quantity supplied 2. This will be our new curve. So let's say that if that cotton gets destroyed and gets more expensive, that's going to make the shirt more expensive. Well, first off, we're not going to be able to supply any of it anymore at $5. Because if it costs us $8 to make, then we're not going to be able to sell it for $5 at a profit. At $10, we're making a little bit of a profit now. So maybe we'll sell 100 of them. At $15, maybe we'll be able to sell, 150, and as the price goes up and we're actually making a profit now, we'll be able to supply more. And so now we can plot out this new supply curve and see how it changes. So at $5, we're not going to be able to produce any of these shirts. All right, at $10, we'll be able to make 100 now. At $15, we'll make 150. At $20, we'll make 200. And at $25, we'll make 250. All right, and so this would be our new supply curve then. We'll call it supply 2 or S2. All right, so what we see is that that curve is moved to the left. All right, so now we're not able to make as much as we could before. Our supply has dropped. All right, and so the opposite would be true if, let's say, we've got a new tractor or better workers or new types of technologies. All right, if our supply is increasing, then it'll move to the right. We would be able to make more shirts at a cheaper rate. All right, and that's going to be the premise of what we look at today, is if our supply is increasing, just like with demand, the curve will move to the right. If it's decreasing, it'll move to the left. Oh, sorry, the pen's shut off now. All right, so some of the big things that can affect our supply of goods. First off is the cost of the productive resources. That's what we were looking at with the t-shirts here, right? If the cotton gets more expensive, then it's going to be harder to make these shirts, and our supply is going to decrease. All right, if the farming gets easier for the cotton or we get better technology, then our supply will increase and it'll move to the right. So before, at $5, we can make 100 shirts. But let's say that cotton becomes a lot cheaper. Well, now at $5, we'd be willing to make a lot more. At $10, we'd be willing to make a lot more because it's easier to make it. All right, the number of sellers is also an important factor here, right? So as far as t-shirts go, if before at $5 in Brunswick we would make 100 shirts, at $10 we make 150 shirts, well, if we're adding all of these new clothing stores, or like if you look at all of the new like restaurants and Sam's Club and things like that we have over there in the north side of Brunswick, then our supply of everything is increasing, right? We've got more houses now, we've got more restaurants, we've got more hotels, things like that. All right, so producer expectations are another big part of it. You can see the same kind of thing happening with Target right now. All right, so as we move into fall, Target's going to start putting out all of their warm weather clothing. The expectation being is that it's going to get cold over the next couple months. Even if it isn't right now, they've already started taking down the swimsuits and beach stuff because they know that people aren't really wanting to buy those things now because they expect that over the next couple months, they won't really need it as much. All right, technology is another really important factor here, right? Usually increases in technology will move this supply curve to the right, whereas decreases in technology would move it to the left. So think about it this way, right? With this virtual classroom, it's completely based on technology. So imagine that your internet's out for today. All right, so how many activities are you going to be able to get done between your 4 classes? Chances are probably none of them or very little of them. All right, and so in that case, your supply would decrease or shift to the left. All right, and if this is how you're kind of having trouble wrapping your head around this, once we start combining these curves together, it'll make a little bit more sense. Oh yeah, pen's still not working. All right, a couple things that the government does to affect the supply of goods. The first off is what are called subsidies. All right, when the government subsidizes something, that means they're giving money to somebody or something in order to make its production cheaper. All right, and so you can think about Hope Scholarship as a good example for this. That's the state of Georgia subsidizing people's college education. If you meet a certain GPA, they'll provide money for your tuition, with the idea being that it'll lower down the cost of college. If the cost of college is lower, then the supply of college students should go up. All right, if they got rid of Hope Scholarship, chances are you would have fewer people going to college. All right, they also use taxes in order to increase or decrease the supply of things. So if you think about things that they tax extra heavily, like alcohol or cigarettes, the sales tax on those are about double what they are on everything else. The idea being that if they raise the taxes on alcohol and cigarettes and make it more expensive, then fewer businesses are going to want to produce them. All right, and so they're going to lower down the supply that way. And the opposite's true of tax breaks. All right, so the government gives you tax breaks on things they want to encourage, like going to college or joining the military or donating things to charity. And so by lowering your taxes if you donate to Goodwill or Red Cross, they're hoping to increase the amount that people donate. All right, and they influence the supply based on regulation, right? So they just raised the age of using cigarettes from 18 to 21. The idea being, by adding that regulation, cigarette companies are going to supply less cigarettes because fewer people want them. And so they'll use these regulations to try to control the supply of products as well. All right, and so go ahead and switch over to the Google Meet. I'm going to want to write out and do this supply and demand curve together. All right, talk to you guys in just a moment.